just, you know, you're half a mile away from the road sign that you used to be able.
Will now be recorded.
We're gonna call the meeting to get order about 7:03. Roll call, Jim Schmidt.
I'm here.
Mel Fleming is working on it. Kathy Enlow.
Present.
Chase Gann.
Here.
Brad Gorsuch is absent. Larry Cushenberry.
Here.
Glenn Thiessen.
Here.
Dwight Fleming.
Here.
William Proba.
Here.
And Derek Dalton is present. Record of proceedings from the September 24th meeting. Does anybody have any corrections or additions or anything? If there are none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the record of proceedings from September 24th. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. I forgot staff. Sharon Olmsted, our secretary.
Here.
Brandon Meyerhoff, our recording secretary.
Here.
And Russ Evie, our plan consultant.
Here.
Sorry, guys.
No worries.
Moving on, item number 3, continued discussion pertaining to Article 27, wind energy conversion system regulations. Did everybody get the red line copy from Sharon?
Yes, I do.
For those of you online, I guess speak up if you don't, but we'll assume everybody did. I think with her red line stuff, I think my plan maybe is to just go through this, not really line by line, but maybe section by section. Discuss red line. If you have anything in that section, we can discuss it at that time also. Any objections to that? So we'll start at the beginning, 27-101, under purpose and intent. Sharon's comment is to remove that section under the first paragraph. Any discussion, any comments, any thoughts?
Is it hard?
Was that somebody online? We didn't hear you.
I think it was Dwight trying to talk.
Did someone have a question?
I have a question. Did you say you wanted to remove that section, or did you want to remove that part that was in parentheses?
Just the part that's in the parentheses that underlined in red. So the words, by protecting the WEX developer's interest in unobstructed wind flow, just remove that.
Okay.
I think that would be definitely to be removed, because, I mean, you know, there's nothing in here that talks about the protecting, you know, residents that are within, you know, this is only, I guess, even when I look at the first line, it talks about the purpose of the overall district is to ensure a regulatory means of facilitating wind energy development of a commercial wind energy, you know, system. And I mean, you know, the definition of facilitate is to make it easier. And I mean, that's pretty strong words, as of just saying we're wanting to make it easier for wind energy development. And granted, there's nothing in here that talks the other side, because some of these things are trying to look at, you know, and making, yeah, I'm not, it's just something that I'd like to just make the point that there is a sort of pretty firm as of trying to make sure that it's promoting it, and sometimes it's a contentious issue here, as of looking at from the other side as well, as of looking at the residents too that are non-participants, because that's what we're here suited to. And I guess maybe answer my question here in the sense that, I mean, this was laid out years ago, this Article 27, when was it initiated, or, because I think, now, while I have the floor, I remember David Mueller even mentioning that he was involved in getting it laid out, and he was one of the people that has a public testimonies that pretty well pointed us that it was getting it, promoting it, and
Correct me if I'm wrong on dates, but I mean, I think a lot of that was originally 2005, 2000, I mean,
a
15,
long time
20
ago.
years old.
There's a lot of history there.
Yeah.
And that first sentence just says it all.
Right, what's that?
I said that first sentence just really says it all. Boom.
Right, other than the fact that it doesn't bring up the other side of it, other than it's making it, trying to make it easier. And I know somebody's gonna say, why are we trying to make it easier? But at the same time, when you're trying to promote it, that's what you're trying to do, is make it easier. So but that line there, I definitely, protecting the developers, I mean, they have lawyers that protect them, and I think, and even rewording that, I think you're gonna have to talk to a lawyer. I mean, for me to sit there and say, oh, let's flip this one or take that out. My comments here are more so the ripple effect of facilitating out. I'm sure that would make the house of cards fall down because of the legalities and all this. So I just wanted to voice my opinion that facilitating says it's making it easier. And some people would say but that's all I have to comment there. I definitely go for taking out that line for protecting them, you know. Because we need to be protecting our citizens, our taxpayers too. We need to, that's not mentioned here. I'm finished up.
No, that's great information. If there's no objections, I think we'll kind of leave that as is and move on to the next paragraph, the next red line.
So adding to the end of that paragraph, the words concerning WEX related issues. The intent of Article 27 is that it controls other articles where there's a conflict, but only concerning WEX issues. Does that make sense?
Do we need to be more specific as to what issues we're talking about, or can we just say that?
My
Whatever
suggestion.
issues come up, right?
Right. So this just prevents
Yeah.
people from pointing to other chapters or other articles in the
Yeah.
zoning regulations that may have nothing to do with wind farm development as a way of maybe trying to avoid some of the conditions in Article 27. This just closes the door and locks
Okay.
it, I think.
Yeah, that's fine.
Any other comments? Anybody have anything else in that first section, 27-101? Anybody have anything in 27-102? 103? We'll just kind of skip ahead here unless somebody speaks up. 104. 105. And we can, I guess we'll jump to 1A on that addition.
I would just say that I would agree with that.
If there are no objections, we'll keep moving. (1B), the highlighted area was from what we had previously discussed, clear back in March, I believe. So I think we've hashed that one. As well as on number 2. Anybody have anything on 3?
On, excuse me,
Sure, go ahead.
back up to 2, I was,
Yep.
I think we discussed this, and I'm just trying to remember exactly what we decided on. Well, we got 1,500 feet from existing non-participating residential structure, but 1,000 feet from the property line. Did we just, I'm pretty sure we did, but I'm just helping me remember. Did we discuss that if we was 1,000 feet from the property lines, that was gonna make where existing property owners wouldn't be able to develop their land within that, if they were non-participating in that 500 feet? Is that what that was gonna do
I
in
think
essence?
that was more if we regulate on participating properties and say that they have to be 1,000 feet away from a participating property
Okay,
boundary line.
because the reason I was asking that specific was because it's 1,500 feet from an existing non-participating structure and 1,000 feet from their property line. So what I'm saying is that say you got your house here, property line's here, and you got this 500 feet here, are we virtually saying that that person that's non-participating can't build in that 500 feet?
No,
No.
he can build within it after the turbine, they just can't build a turbine if a building.
Okay, that was okay. That was what I was wanting to
Well,
clarify.
that'd just be up to you if you want to
Right.
be that close.
I just wanted to make sure we wasn't coming
Yeah.
down and saying, okay, you can't do that.
Right, absolutely.
Okay.
I would add, just put railroad with plural.
Good catch. Anybody have anything else on 2? I know we spent some time on it. We've had some time to think about it. Those were some good questions there. If not, we'll move on. I think I brought up 3 and 4. I know the next red lines are on 5. To remove the first line and add the next line. So we would remove applicant shall construct the smallest number of turbine access roads as reasonably feasible and add turbine access road location shall be agreed upon in writing between the Wex owner and the landowner.
Assume you're noting the typo on the turbine.
Yes.
I might just jump in while we're thinking about it and just make an observation that when you have a regulation that says as reasonably feasible, who's to make that determination? So we want to try as best we can to take ambiguity out of regulations. It's not always possible. But in this situation, this is one of those things, and I think there were several of them in Article 27. Just kind of like, what's the point? Similar to the first one that William and I discussed on the, on talking about protecting unobstructed wind flows. I mean, that's just kind of a non-statement in a lot of ways, as is this. So I think it's a good catch by Sharon and probably needs to be removed. Or should be removed.
Brad had a comment on 5. And the last sentence to add state and FEMA regulations.
Yes. had talked about that. And we can talk about this later on in this article too, but it should be that the applicant must follow FEMA regulations and any other,
Local, yada, yada.
yeah, because you have county, state, Corps of Engineers, could be Coast Guard if it's in a navigable.
All applicable, I mean,
But
more or
here's,
less.
I
let
mean,
me skip.
it's a good
forward.
point, because we do have DWR permits for such things as well. And the FEMA and DWR permits usually go hand in hand. So where you have one for a stream crossing, you're gonna have both.
Could,
Can I just throw this out here before we
Sure.
get too far in the weeds on that one? Later, you'll see a red comment that says it addresses flood zones and any development, permanent or temporary, identified as being located within a special flood hazard area must obtain all necessary floodplain development permits and authorizations from the KDA, DWR, Marion County, U.S. Corps of Engineers, and it should say, and any other applicable,
Regulatory agency.
yeah, any other regulatory agencies prior to applying for a construction permit.
could we just say on that one there, the applicant must follow all applicable regulations instead of naming each one of them out?
Certainly.
I mean, because depending on the area, applicable is gonna mean different things.
Yeah.
Sure.
I wrote down federal, state, and local, but why, we could
Applicable,
make it even more
I mean,
streamlined than that, yeah.
I'm good with that.
If there are no objections, we'll strike FEMA and put all applicable.
Yep, that's good.
Sounds fine.
Yeah, this is Mel. Maybe just a little bit of a contrary thought or maybe a little explanation. My understanding is we're talking about access roads to a turbine, so we're talking about driveways on private property. So are we saying that they need to put in a bridge that won't flood, like typically would put in a bridge over a public road, a right of way or a public road? That maybe seems like that's making a requirement that's probably not necessary,
It's
but it's
just,
not public road.
so special flood hazard areas, which are FEMA designated zones, require certain regulatory standards.
but can I add this to it also? The reason I was suggesting applicable is, let's say they have a waterway, okay, on the maps, you usually go by the little blue squigglies.
Yep.
They're blue squigglies for a reason. That means they're regulated water flow. So if you have one of the little blue squigglies that goes across private land and you're building something to cross that, even though it's private land, you have to apply by the same laws and rules and regulations that cross that blue squiggly as the state does across it. Is that,
Yes,
Yes,
that's
exactly.
correct.
Yep.
Yep.
Does that answer your question, Mel?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Sure.
Kathy she pointed out there should be a hyphen. Kathy, where is that at?
Okay, it is, at the very beginning, 27-101, it should be 27-101 in both places. And 27-104 should be 27-104 in both places on the first page.
I thought it looked funny, but I just kind of went right on past me.
Yeah, no, that's no problem, I
The
just,
headings.
Yeah, mine's got it.
mine's got it too.
It is on mine.
Well,
Yeah,
Put
it
it
is
off
on
money or something.
Huh.
Oh,
Okay.
that's right, we gave certain members.
Oh,
Just to mix it up.
the copy, okay, so Kathy, the copy I printed at home does not, but the copy that I have here on the desk does. So maybe,
okay, well, I printed mine off at home, so
Okay.
I'm not sure why. I mean,
that's what I was looking
Yeah, see, that's.
Yeah, no, thanks
The one
for
I printed
pointing
off
that
at home
out.
doesn't have
Sorry, I
you.
couldn't tell
That's
where
yours.
you were talking about there.
Yeah, the one I printed off.
Sorry.
no, that's fine.
Doesn't it?
It doesn't, but this is the exact same.
I wonder if it's a format issue.
It could be.
Number 5. So we struck FEMA, added all applicable. Top line of that, is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
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 Anything else in 5? Okay, anything in 6? The next red line is in 7, which is all lubricants and or hazardous materials to be located on the premises in connection with the WEX facility shall be kept and transported in accordance with all state and federal regulations. Move to 27107.
And this is gonna be applicable to several of these red lines for you.
Yes, so from a regulator's standpoint and actually putting this regulation into play when we're permitting, some of these are a little bit jumbled when it comes to what should be here at the CUP application point and what needs to come before construction permits are submitted. Things like number 7 really come more when the WEX owner has selected the construction company. And so if they don't have a construction company selected yet, we're gonna get a canned answer for number 7.
So you're saying they don't have a clue when they apply for the CUP?
Right.
And that's why you want it under the construction permit, to get maybe a more correct response?
Yes. Otherwise, we're going to get a blanket statement that just says, we will comply with this regulation, and that's all we're gonna get.
It's kind of a sequencing of when these things are triggered.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I'm good with moving it.
So,
Makes sense.
Yep.
okay, we'll move it. Number 8, we talked about applying previously where they must apply for the aircraft detection lighting system. That was from our March meeting also.
So Brad Gorsuch had some comments on that. I think he feels like this is a little bit redundant. He suggested we take out that whole second sentence. So in the first sentence, no lights shall be installed on the towers unless required by the FAA. And then and also take out, at no point shall white strobe lights be permitted. He's saying if no lights are permitted, no lights are permitted unless the FAA determines they must have a light. And then the FAA tells them what kind of light they're gonna have on it. And then my only thing was, if the applicant must apply, or the applicant must apply for an aircraft detection lighting system, and if granted by the FAA, if the FAA will allow, then such system shall be installed and used.
I would,
Isn't that talking about two different things? Because it's talking about lights, but the aircraft detection lighting system is the controlling of the light.
Yes, that's correct.
And so our intent there is that we don't want to have white strobe lights.
And
I agree with that. I mean, I would say do not, regardless of whether FAA requires red or white, we don't want white lights. Period.
okay,
So
so you want to keep that language?
I would say so. That way, if there is lights, it's definitely red. And then the other thing, if granted, down there in that last sentence,
Mm-hmm.
I would propose that the applicant must apply and be granted aircraft detection license system. I mean, I don't know much about that process, or I don't understand why they wouldn't grant it.
If the FAA determines that they don't need lighting, then this is just saying that if the FAA determines that they do need lighting,
Which that's covered in,
that they have to install the system.
right, I agree with that.
And then if they don't have to have lighting, then
They
it's
don't have any lights.
a moot issue, right?
Right, but what I'm saying is that aircraft detection lighting system, to where there is no lights unless an aircraft is present. I would propose that be a requirement to get a WEX
Mm-hmm.
in Marion County.
We determine it, not the FAA.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's a better way to word that?
I would say, I would keep sentence one, no light shall be installed unless required by FAA.
Mhm.
If lighting is required, an aircraft detection lighting system must be used.
Yeah.
Okay.
Additionally, at no point shall white strobe lights be permitted.
Okay.
What happens if I'm not familiar enough with that process, if they say that it's not applicable or it's not appropriate for us to have an aircraft detection lighting system?
My only thought, and I like how Chase worded it, except will they, I mean, I don't know much about flight patterns. Are there certain flight patterns where they won't let you put one of those in and shut those lights off? That's my only, I don't know enough about it.
I don't either, but I
So-
would, that's just, I would say if we,
We want to make it a requirement
to have that,
as,
Period.
that's my opinion.
Either no or this,
Right.
not red lights.
Mm-hmm.
okay.
So if
I don't know
lighting
enough
is
about the process.
required, the applicant must apply for an aircraft detection lighting system.
Yeah, I can say it over again, I think I have it memorized.
Okay.
So, in totality, no light shall be installed on the towers unless required by FAA. If lighting is required, an aircraft detection lighting system must be used. At no point shall white strobe lights be permitted.
Got it.
Okay.
That's fairly concise.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you're taking out the second and third sentence and just combining it.
And all
Anybody?
these changes will get, I'm sorry, Eric, all these changes will be made before it's sent to the board of county commissioners, so everybody can have another look at it. Something's not worded perfect. Blame Sharon. Always. Or Brian.
Anybody online have any comments on that?
I don't, I think,
No, I'm good with Chase.
I'm fine with it, and my only concern is do we know enough about how that process works, or to make sure we aren't doing something, I mean, that's not feasible.
Jesse, did you have a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to chime in just for a moment here.
Is this public
This,
discussion?
so if the FAA doesn't allow, oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just, there was a question about public comment, and since we kind of continued from last meeting, it really is still open, so go ahead, Jesse.
Okay. This condition of FAA approval, there are circumstances, and I can't know them all, but they do exist where the FAA will not approve an ADLS system for the safety of aeronautical travel, navigation. So I would just add that there are definitely circumstances where the FAA will not approve an ADLS, where they would approve a typical red marked structure.
So that would be some area they don't wanna shut the lights off at all, is that basically would be, I don't know.
I think it's near airports
Yeah, I guess that'd be my,
or landing zones of,
Which a wind turbine wouldn't be applicable in that locality anyway.
but I think that's what it is.
Yeah, probably so.
I mean, I guess we could always supplement that within the event that the FAA prohibits the ADLS system, then red lights as the third Plan C.
Either that or that would trigger some sort of review by the planning and zoning board or something of that nature. That way there is no loophole there.
it probably would trigger anyway because if they can't meet that requirement, then there would have to be some sort of a variance, or that would be a condition on the application. Would that be right?
I'd have to go for appeals.
Yeah.
In essence, let's say Expedition Wind was saddled with this particular requirement and they couldn't get those systems in place, and but they do need to light them, so they do need a waiver of that condition. They would go through another public hearing to amend the CUP. Public hearing, we would make a recommendation, county commission would approve or deny. So that would bring it back through the process.
So if it's not there and they needed to amend it, it would trigger basically another hearing.
Correct. And there are times, there are certain conditions where that would be straightforward and needed. Clearly, I think everybody would agree that that would be needed. In other circumstances, it may, just open up another Pandora's box of public comments that may or may not be relevant to the situation. So this would be something that you could either have staff and give a zoning administrator the authority to verify the FAA. So the applicant's not calling the FAA up saying, hey, save us a couple of $100,000 or whatever. I know nothing about the cost differences, but let's say it's a obvious financial hardship to put this system in place. You call somebody up and say, hey, I need a denial letter. And you start getting denial letters from the FAA. Not to say that that would happen, but that's certainly...
Hypothetically, it could.
It's hypothetical. As Sharon and I have talked throughout this process, a lot of, we're not experts. We're not structural engineers, we're not electrical engineers. There are certain things that you have to give over to the industry and their representatives to take care of, making certain that we can control what we can control. And this is one of those that are just kind of right there on that fence. We don't have, all that. I have a lot of interaction with the FAA, but not as it relates to putting lighting systems on wind towers.
So, I mean, you could still you could put if lighting is required, comma, the applicant must apply for an aircraft detection lighting system, and if granted by the FAA, such system shall be used. I don't know if that's still,
That doesn't get to what I'm proposing.
Yeah.
okay,
I'm proposing that be a requirement.
okay.
That lighting system be a requirement to have a turbine in Marion County.
So-
I'm not saying I'm speaking for everybody on the board, but that's what I would propose.
Right, and the
So-
question is to whether there's a plan C.
Right.
So
And
if
plan.
they can't get that, then that turbine's not okay, basically, is what would essentially happen.
Yeah.
Okay, I see
I
what you're
mean-
saying.
And if that's not acceptable, then, maybe have some sort of, it sounds like it would trigger a potential variance anyway, if that became a problem.
In this
And
situation.
I think that would be a heightened, that would heighten the requirement, and that would make it, we would vote as a board, or however that process transpires, we would vote on that particular issue singularly.
personally, I'm okay with adding the language that Sharon shared there, if lighting is required, the applicant must apply for an aircraft detection lighting system. And I think the key thing is in there, like we said earlier, we want to have red lights, and if it's possible, we'd like to get the aircraft detection lighting system included.
If I'm understanding Chase right though, what Chase is saying is if you can't get an auto detection lighting system on the tower, then we don't want the tower. Is that where you're headed, Chase?
Essentially. I mean,
That's what-
I personally don't wanna see one more red light. Not that I personally have just too many problems with turbines.
Right.
I just don't wanna see no more red lights.
Right.
That's just, and you can see them from,
Oh, yeah.
from Harvey County.
You're preaching to the choir, buddy. I'm surrounded.
You see it in Junction City.
200 megawatt facility, I wonder how many wouldn't qualify for that.
That's what I don't, I think that would be, I don't know much about it, but I would venture to say that that's,
Unless you're in Shawnee County or Sedgwick County or Johnson County.
right.
When's that gonna come in?
If Southern Marion County can get it, and I really commend the wind company for,
They offered it, yeah.
I'm impressed by that personally. I think that's terrific. So if they can get it in Southern Marion County, which that's our closest border to any sort of major airport.
To the Harvey County, I'd say, has a medium-sized airport right there.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I don't think that would put any undue stress on any further wind development. But if it does, there's a protocol in place to allow for a variant if possible.
Yeah.
Sure.
So.
That would contradict our first line where we're supposed to make it easier for them. Now, that doesn't make, I'm being the devil's advocate here, but it's.
I would just strike facilitating and then that would be.
I don't wanna say it like that.
I mean, I guess that's
gonna make it harder.
my comment on that is, yeah, like Sharon said, how much would that really affect the wind farm from being completed in this county?
I don't think much.
Now, the one they
I just
proposed
think that would
down
just
south,
allow some protections for
they've said that they're
for
gonna
other
have
folks.
Is it,
Yeah.
do we want to, or can we add something about, they must have this, if it's denied by the FAA, I mean, we basically put it in writing that they come back through this board.
Right.
Would it be a development plan, amendment? Not really.
I might just scratch and jump in. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
All right, so the two paths to take with modestly significant outcomes. So we can set it up to where if they cannot achieve what the standard is, we can state within that, within item 8, that they shall apply for and be granted an amendment to the CUP. That's a zoning thing. That means it would come, public hearing, come for a recommendation here, and then ultimately decided by the Board of County Commissioners. If we say nothing about it being an amendment, it would be my opinion that it is a variance of the standards of the zoning regulations and not an amendment to the CUP. Then we would have a public hearing where you all would be not planning commissioners, but Board of Zoning Appeal officials. Your decision is final. So the question becomes, is this a sensitive enough issue within a very sensitive land use to where the final authority is the Board of Zoning Appeals or the County Commission? So that's a question that needs to be decided ultimately, and it may not necessarily be decided, obviously, by this board, since this is just a recommendation to the County Commission. But that would be something for the County Commission ultimately to consider, is who has final authority on that one particular standard.
The only thing I just was thinking, y'all don't have very many military aircraft maneuvers going on south where they're talking for this windmill proposal, right? Because the reason I'm saying this is where I'm at, man, I got C-130s, Warthogs, I got the whole Air Force coming over my property all the time. And sometimes those guys are on exercises where they got the transponders turned off. And that's what I'm wondering is that what activates this thing? Because that would be the only thing I would see that would interfere is if it's the transponders on the aircraft that activate the lights and there's a military maneuver going on, they won't activate the lights, and that might be the problem that we face with the denial.
Well, with the United States Air Force, I doubt that's a problem, personally. I'm sure they've got.
I'm probably sure they're seeing the damn thing on their FLIR, but I'm just saying, I'm just saying that's probably the aircraft that wouldn't trip them.
But
I mean, I guess
the FAA would have all that on file, and they know that.
If the system's there and the military aircraft doesn't trip it, I don't know how that's under our purview, I guess.
We require a no hazard letter from whoever the FAA anyways. So they take a basic look at the area and make sure there's not any potential hazards just right off the bat with the turbines in general.
Right.
So if it's in a no-fly zone, a turbine isn't gonna work.
Yeah, I was just throwing that out there. I wasn't trying to
Yeah, that's.
change the opinions or nothing. I was just
Sure,
throwing
we
that out
don't want
there.
anyone to get hurt, obviously. That's not the intent here.
But I will say this, they thought, a lot of the general public thought was that we wasn't gonna be seeing those planes come across there no more because of those turbines.
Fly right through.
That it ain't bothering them a lick.
They fly right through.
I got C-130s coming down there and zigzag. I think they use it for like practice now.
Yeah, my understanding, because we got into Diamond Vista with crop dusters, and that's when I learned that, you know, that the lat and long coordinates of each one of those turbines are issued and plugged into GPS for pilots, and so it's a fairly easy process from that standpoint.
Right.
I guess back to Russ's comment, to where if we change it so that it is required and they have to do something, you know, if the FAA does not allow it, I would personally rather the elected officials have to make that call, I guess, than this board. I don't know how everybody else feels. I mean, we would still review it and recommend, but they would be the deciding vote.
I would agree with that.
Just because they are the elected officials.
So we could just simply add a statement at the end of that to say any modification of this standard shall require an amendment to the approved CUP.
So we would leave Chase's
Yeah,
verbiage in that they.
tight, hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
But
makes
then,
perfect sense.
here's the door you're gonna have to go through if you can't live with it.
Makes sense.
I like that. Any comments on Lon?
Can you re-summarize that a little bit to make sure I followed your present position?
So on number 8, it would be no lights should be installed on the towers unless required by the FAA. If lighting is required, they must install an aircraft detection lighting system. At no point shall white strobe lights be permitted. If this requirement cannot be met, a amendment to the CUP would be required. Sound good?
So what's involved there is an amendment to the CUP. Is that where we need to go with that?
The amendment would then come back through this board. Basically, the amendment would be whether we thought it was necessary to avoid the aircraft detection system, or basically it would trigger another review by this board who would then recommend that for the county commissioners.
Alright. So that basically come back to us as a variance then to our codes.
Well, a variance and a CUP amendment would be two different things. A variance would be the Board of Zoning Appeals would make the final determination on that. Or an amendment to the CUP would go back through that public hearing process. The Planning Commission would make a recommendation to the governing body, and the governing body would make the final decision.
Okay.
A
Yeah, I
question I would have would be, whose responsibility is it to make sure those things are working? Are we just gonna assume that the wax is taken care of, monitoring that? Those
You-
lights, I mean?
The lights,
Yeah.
that the lights are working?
Yeah,
Generally, if the light's not working, it gets reported by the community.
yeah. That's
People
not
that-
our responsibility, is it?
No, it's not necessarily our
To enforce
responsibility.
it ultimately, but
Yeah.
usually you get public comment.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna tell us about it.
Derek?
I don't wanna get sued
Yeah.
because the lights weren't working and some plane
No.
crashed.
It's the
Into it.
responsibility of the WEX owner
Yeah.
to maintain and operate.
Is that just an assumption that we don't have to address?
Certain things we check on,
Okay.
certain things it's kinda left up to the community. If you see a light out, report it.
No, but I mean the detection thing, aircraft detection, you gotta have a plane flying over it, come on.
Right. With the liability issues, I would imagine that there's probably pretty good maintenance by the owner who is liable.
Yeah.
But the county's kind of a referee sitting on the sideline in that regard. And I don't know any, as we all know, I know very little. But my supposition is that these turbines, for their mechanics, for their generating capacity, for the tangential things like these lights, it's probably all electronically monitored, and there's probably gonna be a red light flashing on somebody's dashboard that turbine number 36 light's not responding. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if that's the case. I would hope that that's the case with a lot of this stuff. I know that there's a lot of things built into the internal electronics
Yeah.
for the running of these turbines that will turn them off if the blade spins too fast, things of that nature, so.
Cause it's one thing to look up there and see if the red light's on. It's another thing to, does it come on when it's supposed to?
Doesn't somebody have a friend that's a crop duster here locally? Let's make him go out once a month.
I don't know if they're still on board.
Jesse would know if the SCADA system would pick up on that. It's the radio control system that comes back. The other thing I was gonna say was that would you propose to have, go back through the Board of Commissioners? That would alleviate what Russ was saying on, rather than just getting blanket statements from the FAA saying they can't get this.
I'm gonna pause you for a second. I know that probably the guys online can't hear you.
Oh.
So if you wouldn't mind using the mic, I know we've been through that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there'll be there would have been some feedback, but if you wouldn't mind.
No, I think that last proposal you guys did was a wise move, because it would create the extra scrutiny that would be needed, because they're not gonna wanna go back in front of the Board of Commissioners and have a hiccup just to get out of these lights. So to alleviate that, that was probably the wisest decision, you guys. So that's all.
Yeah. Those were comments from Jonah.
You can say it faster than
Anybody else have any comments on 8? I think we've maybe nailed it down. If not, we'll move on to 9. The addition at the end of 9 is the county will assign addresses to each ingress point for turbine access roads. The WEX owner shall post county-approved address signs at the ingress points.
I would just question, I don't recall speaking of this, but what would be the purpose of this?
So this is mostly for, medical emergency personnel and fire rescue personnel. When there's an accident or a fire or something at a turbine location, that gives EMS services the ingress point to the access road up to the turbine. So,
But how common is a fire around a wind turbine?
there was an injury in the Diamond Vista project during the construction phase, and EMS had to figure out how to get into where the turbine was at.
I guess that'd be my only comment, being in the middle of those, is you're going down a county road, you can see the turbine, you can probably see the accident, but how the heck do you get
How do
there?
you get there?
And I think that would give this an actual road address to get into it, I think is the.
Our addresses are registered with the 911 system. It's a state database, so I go out and get physical coordinates, and it's assigned an address based on measurement and orientation. So EMS should be able to plug in that address, and it'll show them exactly where that point is at.
As one of the guys that has to find all of those, because I work EMS, it's a really big thing. It don't sound like it, but it is. 'Cause
Well,
if you listen to the radios lately we've had calls lately where we knew where things were at, but because of a washout or a this or that, threw a monkey wrench in it, when you get down to it, you're talking like a few minutes, somebody could die over this, so.
Right.
Well, it's just, I can think of several instances where it's less than, it's a quarter mile from the road to the turbine, but that ingress is
On the south.
3/4 of a mile and around another half mile before you can get in there. And
Yeah, I
so
see
that's,
the point of that.
Exactly.
that's, I guess, I don't have any problem with it.
I think it's a good deal.
William, did you have anything?
Well, and the roads are actually mapped too then, because you're gonna have a sign on the road, which the county's gonna have to install, and it's gonna be a address.
No,
The
Wex-
Wex owner will
Right,
install,
right,
yeah.
they
yeah.
will do that, okay.
Yeah.
It's not like a road sign that's on a, like, street sign or something. It's more like a
No.
mailbox.
Right.
Right.
That's what I was mixed up a little bit too. I
Okay.
didn't wanna see a bunch of new.
They're not
street
new
signs.
roads, they're like,
No.
be like the number on your mailbox.
Right,
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like a mailbox
Mhm.
type address deal.
and county approved, that would be through you, you'd approve what they look like.
Yeah, either I or emergency management. I think there's a state standard for address signs. They're either, I think they're blue
Blue with white lettering.
and have to be a certain size.
Yep. If they're doing the same, I didn't mean to interrupt,
Go
but
ahead.
if they're doing them the same as the Diamond Vista's got your basic blue and white. I think county actually issued or sent out address signs to
We-
people at one point 20 years ago or something, and they're
Right.
similar to that. And they just put them on a post at that driveway.
I just didn't want Boomer Center covers or nothing.
No one does.
Won't be if I'm approving them.
In parentheses, no boomer seat.
Right?
Anybody else online, comments there? Thank
Sounds like a good
everybody.
idea.
Okay. We'll move on to 10. Changing developer to owner.
I have a question on that. Those negotiations often happen when that lease agreement happens, I believe, done by the developer initially. So I don't know whether we want to say developer / owner, or, because that ownership of that whole project changes over time.
Well, just like Diamond Vista, I think a lot of those were made with Tradewind,
Mhm.
and
Right.
then and now it is transferred to Enel.
Mhm.
So I kind of like developer / owner.
Yeah.
And mind you, this is at the end of it. So really, we're looking in the future as to whoever,
Owns it.
so the developer, to me, seems to intimate the person that's building it.
Right.
Yeah,
The owner is going to be the person standing, last person standing that's gonna decommission it. That's
Right.
just my, I read it the exact same way.
I think we, you know, developer slash owner, I don't,
And/or owner,
yeah,
that way somebody's held responsible.
yeah. That way the owner can't say, well, that was the developer's problem.
Yeah.
I think we ought to at least have them both on there, developer slash owner, and, yeah,
And/or owner.
and, yeah, let's do it and or owner.
And then it's 18 inches.
Then-
Y'all may have hashed that out before. Is 18 inches suitable for a farmer?
I only have about 4 inches of good topsoil, so if that, 18 would be great if I had 18 inches of topsoil.
The only thing I'm
Well,
thinking
what
is,
about, I mean, is that
Root
18 inches, I mean, if it was 4 inches, you'd hit the concrete, what I'm getting at. Is 18 inches to the top of the concrete suitable?
It's cover. It's 18 inches minimum of cover. And one of the things that we did talk about, and that's a very, I'll just say that that's a relatively standard
That's what I was gonna say.
condition. Yeah, and I will also say that, and I can't remember if it was here, I feel like it was here that we talked about, this is also something that is very common to be reflected in the owner lease agreements.
Well, I understand
Yeah.
that, but there's not much, from my experience, there's not much flexibility in, basically, the wind owners, whoever's developing, they're gonna do more dictating on that relative
yeah.
to the CUP.
Right,
They're
right.
not gonna, cause they're not gonna say 20 inches for this guy, 18 inches for this guy, 26 for this guy. They won't never agree to anything like that.
I for one would build something on that thing. We got 30 by 30 foot cube of concrete.
Right.
I think 18 inches is pretty industry standard, or just
was just curious.
not industry, but cover, you know, when you're talking cover dirt, even from my days in engineering, 18 inches is pretty standard.
Yeah, I didn't know, that's why I asked. I know a cow won't never find it. I didn't know about a tractor.
Until she stands in the hole for
Is it sort of silly to put native grass, because if you plant soybeans around the tower and then they take the tower out, you're gonna have native grass in the
That's-
Yeah, and we've
that's
talked
the
about
part
that.
Where
I knew
any
it's
other standards can be negotiated with the
Okay, yeah.
landowner. Yeah,
But native grass would be the most strict.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
yes.
And I think that's why it is the way it is.
Okay.
I agree 100%.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else on 10? If not, we'll move on to 11. Repowering any wind turbine will be considered an alteration to the development plan and shall require a public hearing following the then current provisions as outlined in the zoning regulations.
So let me tell you what the intent of this was and then maybe clarify a little bit. I'm not sure I like the wording just yet. This is intended for projects that may have tax abatements available for so many years. If they have to repower, sometimes they'll keep the tower part of the structure and then just replace the nacelle and that kind of thing. But that keeps them on that tax abatement forever, basically. So if they're retowering the project, I think that they should have to come back to a public hearing. If there are situations where they may need to
Repower a turbine.
repower a turbine just because the turbine is faulty or whatever, it's not my intention to take that land use right away from them just because they had a faulty turbine and had to repower it. So I'm not exactly sure how to get that point across here.
I think maybe it needs to be like a minimum percentage, like if they're repowering 25% of the project, or, I mean, I just threw that out there, I don't know. I mean, I know this happens because Rez, who worked on Diamond Vista, is out west of Salon, repowering those and new blades on. So I know this, I mean,
We could treat it somewhat like a non-conforming use, where we say that a non-conforming use can exist in perpetuity, but if it remains unutilized for a period of 6 months, 2 years, whatever that time frame is, then they lose the non-conforming rights, and then they would have to reestablish that use through the current process. And so I don't know that much about it, but if you have a turbine that has been unutilized, how does one find that out? I'm not certain necessarily. But if you have a turbine that has been powered down or shut down or has been in disuse for a period of X number of, like a year, 5 years, whatever that number is, then that turbine has to go back through the process, or a redevelopment or a development plan has to be amended and go back through the process. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I think if a turbine's down, it takes the whole string down, but that'd be a good question for Jesse or someone with subject expertise.
I guess my thought on that is, if a turbine goes down and they have to repower that, you know, that's a repair.
Yes.
Right.
If they're going in and upgrading the entire WEX facility, then I think that needs to come back through us.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I guess that's my, I think that's what you were maybe headed towards here.
Or like one
Yeah.
that would be down for 3 years or a period of time, and then wanting to get that one back up and rolling.
Yeah.
The way it is in the oil field, if you have to shut one in or something, you have to file a temporary abandonment. And you've got X number of years to either put that well in use or plug it.
See, my mind was going in that
Right.
direction.
It's a temporary abandonment, and they can only temporarily abandon it for X number of years, or I don't know how to.
I think the desire is to prevent somebody, kind of like we do with rail banking. There'll never be a train go down those tracks again, but everybody kind of wants to keep it in place in case we want to.
Right.
So I would hate, again, for either taxing purposes, or quite frankly, I would imagine that decommissioning a tower isn't free. And so why not just leave that crap up if you don't have, and just keep telling the county, hey, we're right around the corner, we're gonna fix it. So I just don't know when that clock starts on you're out of production. And maybe that's easy, maybe that's a relatively simple thing. But if you can illustrate, and maybe that's a letter from Sharon, your turbines haven't been spinning, we've noticed, you're on the clock, you have 18 months, let's say, 24 months, to bring that, to repower that system back up, or your decommissioning agreement, you take them down. So I can appreciate the need for that.
Yeah, but how to regulate that though?
Seems like I've read this so many times, it does seem like there was, either in past conversations or we did talk about, you know, that exact thing.
We talked about that at the last meeting, actually, Chase. So that was some verbiage that was some language added into Article 19.
Yes.
About
discontinuance of use.
Right, discontinuance of a CUP.
So maybe we refer that line back to 19, possibly.
And it may be that I'm not sure how to state it. If it's a certain percentage of the project, then those ancillary agreements need to be revisited by the commissioners. Because the commissioners are the ones that agree to the pilot, the decommissioning, and the road use agreements. So maybe this gets deflected back to the governing body if a certain percentage of the project is repowered, or
Anybody online have any comments or thoughts?
The way this is written, it would, repowering any wind turbine, I'm a little uncomfortable about I mean, that would mean just one out of 100. Then we gotta open the whole thing up again and have public hearings. Seems like that doesn't quite work.
Was your, sorry, Dwight, Sharon, was your intent on a single repowering, or was your intent on they're coming in to upgrade the system?
Really, it was more the system itself, trying to evade.
Because I think our decommissioning, that 19, some of that sort of thing, and the decommissioning agreement addresses downtime with a turbine.
Right.
So I guess I took this as the intent was, are they coming in and upgrading this system, which then kicks them into a new, like you said, tax abatement and everything else. If they do that, they need to come back through here
Right.
on an upgrade
And-
system-wide, I guess.
Yeah, we can have
And really, it only affects those ancillary agreements. The issue that I'm thinking could happen down the line in the future would affect the pilot agreement, the road use agreements.
Because they'd be bringing in more equipment,
Right.
new cranes, I mean, hauling in new nacelle, all that sort of thing. That's what you're, so, you know, like if they're, you know, I guess that's where I threw out 25%. If they're repowering 25%, you know, that's a pretty substantial project. Because I'm a little in like what Dwight said, if they're just gonna repower one turbine, I feel like that's a whole can of worms for one turbine.
Right, I agree. And like you said, there's a difference between maintenance or faulty equipment versus trying to slip a new system in and not pay taxes.
Right.
What's the proper terminology they use for, like, I know like they'll have 4 turbines that feed into one, is that is it a circuit? Or
String, they call them strings.
strings? What would happen if we worded that repowering any strings? Because if they was coming in to upgrade, one would think they would do the whole string, right? As an upgrade instead of just one of the turbines in the string. So if we put it in there that repowering any string would kick in, because that would tell you they're up to something if they're doing the whole string.
Right.
That was gonna be my comment as well. Either the string or the development or the
Yeah.
plant or however they
Whatever the
call it,
proper
whatever they
word
call
is.
it, yeah.
Yeah, instead of a percentage, just any
Yeah.
one of the strings.
Right.
Because otherwise they might do 10% at a time. over
Exactly,
the
because if you put in a
percent.
percent thing, that just gives them a, you know, okay.
Right, I mean,
And a string could be anything from 4 to 12 or whatever, right?
As far as I,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would eliminate that just fixing one turbine for maintenance.
Right.
Dwight, did you have something?
And my hunch would be is that we're somewhat on agreement on what our intent is, but personally, I don't have near the experience or the terminology to write that correctly, and surely we can find someone that could give us counsel on that. Because here again, we could come up with something we're comfortable, we could say 25%, or we could say a string, or we could say this road, or we could come up with something that isn't appropriate very easily, but it's what we want to do, but I don't think it'd be appropriate for long term.
Yeah.
Would you like for me to seek legal counsel for that particular item?
Either legal counsel or someone in the know as to what's appropriate on, what appropriate language, what our intent is, how do we accomplish that? Because, we can say something here that I think we're kind of in agreement on, but how do we do it correctly?
So yeah, I guess to summarize this, I think we're all in agreement that it's a more than one turbine kind of thing upgrade, whether it's string or circuit or whatever.
not to include repairs even,
Right, more of an upgrade.
Right.
I guess is
Right.
if something blows up and they have to replace it, that's completely different, in my opinion, than
That's a repair.
taking out a working element and putting a better element in, I guess.
That's kind of why I was headed towards that string thing, because the odds are you're not gonna have 4 in a row go bad at the exact same time.
Yeah, and you know, whatever that legal terminology may be, I mean, I think we'll have Sharon include that in, but and unless somebody objects, I think that's pretty well the consensus of the board. Okay, number 11. Number 12 has the addition of a desktop study and mitigation plan is reasonable at the CUP phase in parentheses. And that is mostly, that's another process thing, because at a CUP process, that's basically what's.
Yeah, this is another tricky one. I mean, you could expect some desktop studies at this point. That's completely reasonable. You could have a mitigation explanation or plan at this point, but what you wouldn't have is actual
on-site studies?
yeah, you wouldn't have any actual facts yet until the turbines are actually at 100%.
And the reason that I thought it was fine was because they will be, at least the ones that I have seen, will do this type of study, because they can computer model shadow flicker at the very least on adjoining property homes throughout the various times of the year. The angle of the sun as it changes annually. They can run a computer simulation of where that shadow flicker is going to occur at any one point of time on the calendar through desktop modeling.
Right. So, I mean, we can leave this paragraph alone. I'm not sure that we need to make any changes to this one. You want that one, don't you?
I'm good.
If it's chilly or whatever.
Any comments or anything on this? I don't have a strong feeling either way, so.
Yeah.
Just leave it.
Okay.
So we'll leave it. Move on to 13. The first line is to remove, the applicant shall identify the potential fire risk associated with the project, including both prescribed burning and non-prescribed burning, natural or accidental. This shall include fire within the site, escape from the site, and the effects of fire originating from outside the site, and also address high-angle rescue. And then moving on, and possibly move this section to 27-107, like we discussed before, for construction permits. Construction permit application shall include fire mitigation and action plan and address high-angle rescue, which was the summary of the line basically to remove.
I would go along with moving that to 27-107.
It's kind of the same discussion as before.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And I'm okay with the new first line sentence there.
Yeah, because basically it's just saying the same thing as without all the mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, more precise. I do have some problems with the rest of that. And I voiced this last meeting, but particularly the last sentence within that paragraph that we're talking about. It says, conditions in accordance with a written prescription that is designed to confine the fire to a predetermined area and to accomplish planned land management objectives. In most cases in Marion County, a written prescription is not, it's definitely not required by the county. So that's adding an unknown restriction on landowners for no real reason. So that I would propose that we strike a written prescription that is designed to confine the fire to a predetermined area and to accomplish planned land management objectives. Strike that completely, and then we move up the highlighted, a portion of the highlighted line down below. I would propose conditions in accordance with county specified rules and regulations. Because landowners have to do that anyway. And I can clarify that if I need to.
Jason, what were you gonna strike out of that first paragraph?
Okay, the first paragraph is basically the last two lines, but it says, I would strike a written prescription that is designed to confine the fire to a predetermined area and to accomplish planned land management objectives. And then I would move up with county specified rules and regulations. So the last sentence would read, prescribed burning is defined as a controlled application of fire to naturally occurring or naturalized vegetative fuels under specified environmental conditions in accordance with county specified rules and regulations. And then I would also strike on that next sentence, I would just simply leave that sentence as the applicant shall acknowledge that an owner, lessee, or occupant of any agricultural land is not liable for property damage caused by or resulting from prescribed burning their own land on the land owned by, leased by, or occupied by the WEX. And leave it simply as that. Because prescribed burning is already defined in the previous sentence.
Gotcha.
So there's no need to continue that on. Because if you just strike that, if you read that, if the prescribed burning is conducted by the procedure stated above. I mean,
Yeah, it's
we've already,
it's redundant.
right.
I think, I mean, that's more in line with what's required in the county. I don't, any objections to that?
Sounds good.
Just a minor change. Just below that red sentence, it is important to be aware that prescribed burning or range burning is a common practice. In Brad suggested we change that to Marion County instead of this area.
Yep.
And then just above the highlighted, where it says county specified rules and regulations, about 2 lines up from that, it should be land or the land owned by, instead of on, should be or. I think that was all I had.
Anybody have anything else? Yeah, let's take a 5-minute break and have a little restroom break, and we'll come back here at about 6:27.
8:27.
8:27. Sorry. 8:27.
I'm gonna shut down, so I didn't do that.
Bathroom break.
Is it getting cold up north there?
It was getting chilly.
Is it?
It says it's 43
Well,
outside.
How warm did it get here?
The wind was,
85.
Yeah, that's about what it was now.
the temperature was staying about the same, but the velocity of the
The
wind
vel-
coming.
But they have to pay property gains when they sell it,
Right.
based on that.
Jeff Bridges would, Lloyd Bridges would.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
interesting read. I'm glad I don't live in California.
For a number of reasons, just add that one to the list.
We'll get back to it here. I think we wrapped up on 13, we're on to 14. Our comments from before that we discussed are there in B. Does anybody have anything else in 14? If not, on 15, there's an addition to add avoidance, impact minimization, and compensatory. Compensatory, yeah. I don't know what I was reading. Compensatory mitigation for the following. We'll go through it, jump down to E, to where all of Marion County is located in the Flint Hills, which does not make any sense.
That's not exactly true.
and F,
Because the line where the Flint Hills ends and the Smoky Hills begin is on my property. It goes through my property. So west of me is Smoky Hills technically.
I think that's why it was probably suggested to remove.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's not factual. It doesn't really need to be in there.
And on F, as an addition, after flood zones, any development, permanent or temporary, identified as being located within a special flood hazard area must obtain all necessary floodplain development permits and authorizations from the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Division of Water Resources, Marion County, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers prior to applying for construction permits.
And I added in after engineers and any other regulatory agencies.
And so, 15 as a whole, any objections to any of those additions and the deletion that clarifies? Okay. Number 16, remove soil erosion, sediment control, and stormwater runoff, and possibly keep applicant shall develop a soil erosion, sediment control, and stormwater runoff plan, and any other required SWPP and NPDES permits shall be finalized and submitted prior to the issuance of a zoning permit and the start of construction.
Are you okay with that, Sharon?
Yes.
I don't have any objection with that. Does anybody else?
No. Brett had a comment on said plan shall identify plans for. He thought plan and plan was confusing, so I don't know if we want to reword it to say said plan shall identify the following.
Sure.
I like that. Anybody else?
Where we at on that?
16 at the end of that paragraph, it says said plan shall identify
Okay.
plans for. Mine doesn't have the punctuation in that copy.
That's weird.
That is weird.
I wonder if certain versions of Word
Must have deleted some of that.
has conditional formatting and some doesn't, because, I mean,
bet it does.
I bet so.
because I printed one off at Park City, and I
Mhm.
printed one off in the basement.
So is there supposed to be a period after project?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This copy, and this hand has it, this
Oh.
copy does not have it.
Okay,
So,
makes sense.
yeah, said plan shall identify the following. Okay? Anybody have anything else on 16? '17. '18 we discussed before. Okay, so that wraps up 105. Does anybody have anything else in 105 that we missed?
Sure, I've got a question.
Sure.
Um,
This is Jesse, is that right?
Yep, Jesse Hopkins Wool with Expedition Wind. Obviously, these conditions You know, we're under a different set of CUPs, but I wanted to ask one question regarding number 16. And typically, we find that the SWIP and the NPDES permits are kind of the responsibility of the construction company just prior to construction and immediately prior to construction permits. Is that the intention for this, or is it the full SWIP to be filed at the time of CUP?
No, that's not my intent here. That's unreasonable. And it is my experience also that a full SWIP in the NPDES comes at the time of construction. So maybe it would make more sense to move that to 27-107.
Because it does state at the start of construction.
Right.
In that additional language.
Yeah.
So maybe that is better suited under the construction permit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily certain that you really could submit for it and have it issued.
No, it would be a very bare bones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But should they still have some sort of plan? Not necessarily the SWIP and the NPDES, you know, not necessarily be permitted, but it seems like the original intent of this line item 16 was to see some sort of plan that addresses the following.
That kinda, well, no, maybe not. Okay, so.
I mean, I'm not saying we're wrong to move it, I'm just asking.
So you're saying more like number 15, where they're giving an overview
Exactly.
of the issues,
Yes.
and they're. I don't know. I mean, some of it's hard to.
Most of that probably, you know, the SWPPs, all that stuff.
You're gonna get a canned answer if you do it too far ahead of the game.
The only question the only part of that raised the question to me was the wording prior to the issuance of a zoning permit.
So
It's really prior to an issuance of a construction permit.
Right.
If it was in 107.
Yes, and I guess as a planner, I think we tend to think of a zoning permit as being a construction permit, but yeah, that would add some clarity. Issuance of a,
What have
Prior to
they
the-
submitted in the past to alleviate 16? Some canned answer? That's where you.
basically, they say they'll comply with that.
With
Expedition
SWIP.
went out of their way to actually develop a preliminary SWIP, but it's,
Subject
Right.
to
yeah, it's somewhat hollow until you actually have that
construction plan.
company. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty typical, I think, of a lot of other major construction projects too, not just wind.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's
Everything touching the dirt has to have an SWPP.
Yeah.
I mean, MDPE or MPDES permits, most all before construction.
That's just part of the building permit, almost universally.
So, do we want to move that to 107? I guess I pose that question to the board.
I see Chase's concern, but I also see the
Well,
functionality.
But that's not
of
really a
it.
concern, it was just a question.
I just feel like they're gonna say like,
Right.
for that, they're gonna say, we will comply with something 107,
Right.
Yeah,
and that's all you're gonna
that's
get.
what we'll get, yes.
I'm okay with moving that to 27-107
Do we need to strike,
zoning.
prior to issuance of a zoning permit?
Maybe it should just include construction permit.
Prior to the issuance of a
Construction permit?
So strike zoning, add construction.
Yeah.
Those permits are important.
Right.
in the overall scheme of things. They are absolutely not important, in my opinion, for a land use decision.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That,
It's change sounds fine to me.
Okay. It's not like it goes away, it's just before construction.
Yeah, it just makes more sense to move it to construction.
I mean, Jesse commented, Randy, I think you're the only other public here. Any comments on 106?
Not really.
Okay. I don't think there's any other public online either.
I don't see anyone.
It's really kind of like I said before, nobody really, buddy, it's like nobody really cares anymore.
For those online, Randy does not have comment.
Randy doesn't care.
He said nobody cares anymore. Okay, 106. Stop me if you have anything left on 105, but we'll move on to 106. I can see a light. There's an addition there about 4 lines down, and all conditions placed on the permit are met.
I'm good with that.
I don't have any objections. If there are none, we'll move on. 107. Anybody have anything in number 107? Number 2, there is an addition that construction permit shall be required for Met towers, electrical substations, SCADA houses, is that what they call those?
Yeah,
SCADA house, operations and maintenance facility, laydown yard, batch plant, turbine access road, crane paths, and any above-ground structure associated with the WEX, not including transmission lines and poles. The WEX owner shall specify whether each item is permanent or temporary. Turbine access roads may be permitted collectively, and crane paths may be permitted collectively. Can we just do turbine access roads and crane paths may be permitted collectively? No, that's not right.
I think that.
After I started saying
yeah.
that made sense.
I don't want to combine the two things necessarily, but
Right.
turbine access roads as a whole can be blanket permitted. Crane walks as a whole can be permitted. I don't know.
Maybe just break that up into 2 sentences. It don't matter either way.
After I started saying it, it made more sense to me.
So I started to do the same thing and then I changed it back, yeah.
Any comments or thoughts? Oh, there's another one at the very end of that. Adding or within such further period as may be agreed on by the applicant. That is the county, I'll read the whole sentence. The county shall have a maximum of 20 working days to review all submitted materials in order to either approve the construction permit or notify the applicant of any deficiencies associated therewith, or within such further period as may be agreed to by the applicant. So that's just giving you a little bit of leeway.
There are situations that arise, I mean, I have yet to be able to approve a
In 20 days.
turbine construction permit in 20 days. There's a lot of review that goes into it. And a lot of times we're back and forth, hey, I need this, and then they get that for me, and it takes a long time.
But do they have any teeth in the fact that you can't get that done? Like if you can't get it done in 20 days, can you be penalized, or you understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
Because what if they don't agree in that?
Mm-hmm.
Is what I'm saying. I'd rather give you more time up front with the leniency and maybe the possibility of agreeing to it sooner,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know what you're comfortable with time frame. I mean, 20 days it seems, you know, with the amount of information that's coming, I guess, my opinion, minimum, you know, month, 30, I mean, it seems like everything is, well, it's gonna be a month, you know, so I don't know if that's a minimum, or I just kinda threw that out there, but.
Sure. And at this point, I mean, the developer's going to do just about anything they can to work with me.
Well,
I mean-
you're standing in the way of them
Yeah,
getting what they need, basically.
exactly.
But if it says right here, the county shall have a maximum of 20 working days.
Mhm.
So if they wanted to be to the book, what if you can't get it done in 20 days? What's their recourse?
That's a good point.
They go to their lawyer.
Yeah,
And then what? So why even have that there?
Sure.
I guess
So why wouldn't we say the county?
Why did the time limit, I guess, so
Right.
the administrator just can't drag their feet forever?
Yes, that's true, and there are other provisions in the regulations for other types of permits, like just a regular accessory.
So it probably was
Building
just word
permit.
language that was just added.
Carried
because it's-
over to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, and
Even though this is a much bigger deal.
State law prescribes these maximum time limits on certain things like subdivision plats, which we very rarely get into in the county. Nowadays, there's a new state law that deals with cell towers. We are under a 150-day shot clock from when a person applies for a cell tower CUP before the Board of County Commission has to make a recommendation or a final determination. Both of those types of things state in the law that if we as a county fail to review and approve make a determination within that time frame, it's de facto approved. We clearly don't want to do anything like that kind of trigger, but it points out what you're saying, and that is, then what?
Make it reasonable, I mean.
Well, is there
yeah.
is there any sort of state guidance on this?
Not on something like this.
My
So
thought
we're
is-
the ones that picked the 20 days originally?
No, I imagine it would just got carried over.
It was probably in some
Yeah.
canned link, I imagine. I mean, I guess my thought is, let's put it out there. Let's give you plenty of time.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's still a day on it, you know, like
Yeah, there's
90
still-
days, to where it's still,
I mean, is that reasonable? I mean,
I'm not sure
I
that
just don't
90
like
days
having that
is
as a cap.
reasonable. I don't know that 90 days is necessarily reasonable on
Their part?
On their part.
so
I mean-
60 days? But that still gives you the flexibility to get it done sooner.
Sure.
I mean, I think our goal is we don't want to handicap you
Right.
or I mean,
Exactly.
whoever in, you know, whatever. That's
Or provide any sort of recourse for, I mean, whatever issues that may arise.
Mhm.
I mean, because what, I can see, you know, they hit you with 50 of them at once.
Mhm.
You're not gonna be able to get all 50 of them done in 20 days.
Right.
Period.
Right.
Or a COVID diagnosis.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all you, Brandon.
Approved.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a big.
Sharon will have to deal with it.
I've been dying to use my big denied stamp at the office. But
I mean, I don't know what the downside is to having that
Longer time.
higher limit.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's still something there that says, well, you said you would have this in 60 days or 45 days or, you know.
Right.
But we don't want to handicap the administrator that says, oh, well, we gave you 50 turbines and you said you'll have them
20
in
days.
20 days.
Right.
Says right here in. I definitely, maybe we should seek legal counsel on that also.
If. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't see a problem with 30 days. There may not be a problem with 60 days even. 3 months may be getting pretty close. They've got construction start days planned by this point. So if I drag my feet too long for some, or not me necessarily, but
Whoever's
this would
in that
apply to
position,
anyone in
yeah.
this position.
I'd say 30 days would still keep things rolling along.
But is it still reasonable? If you can't get it done in 20 days, then what's 10 more days?
Right.
Dwight, did you have a comment?
Well, I was gonna say, I think we all realize that Sharon's not gonna drag her feet and do this. I think that there might be an administrator somewhere down the road that isn't on top of things and working diligently. So we need to keep that in mind as well, and rather than extending it out indefinitely to some ridiculous long number, it kind of helps keep that office functioning properly. The other question I'd have is, it's stated as 20 working days. We're talking, someone is throwing out 30 days. That's if we're talking about 30 days, that's essentially 20 working days. Are we talking about 30 working days, or are we going to define that more specifically?
I'm salaried, they can make me work every day. Yeah, that's a good point.
Or leave it at 20 business days.
Well, that's what it is.
I think that's how I would read it, as
That is
working
20
days.
working days.
That's
But
essentially
she's
a
already said that that's not, in a typical scenario, that's not enough time.
20 days isn't a whole lot of time. I haven't had any issues working with any developers
Right.
over that timeline. I actually have a written statement from Expedition. They realize that they'll be dropping a bunch of permits, that I have the ability to approve those in a phasing. So,
And that's why you added that last,
as agreed upon,
Yeah.
yeah.
which did not, did Treatment do the same thing with Diamond Vista?
They did the same thing. They gave us those applications early, knowing that it was gonna take a little longer to evaluate each site.
I mean, I know, like, you're standing in the way of them having what they need, so they're gonna work with you. But I still feel like while we're here, we should adjust it.
There should be some, because there is, I mean, they actually have legal recourse if you do not get it done in 20 days, 20 working days.
Well, what their legal recourse, I mean, they're waiting on a construction permit to get something constructed, so it's not like they're just sitting there. They have no incentive to work with the zoning. Yeah, I'm okay with finding a deep number, but they have an incentive as well to work with our zoning administrator to make sure that this all happens.
They have every reason to want to work with the zoning administrator at this point.
What happened if you just put down 45 calendar days?
That sounds good to me. I mean, that's, you know,
I
in
mean, that gives you a
reality,
month and a
that's-
half, that gives you a month and a half.
I was gonna say 30 working days, which is the same thing,
Yeah.
6 weeks, basically.
Mhm.
45 calendar days, I think that sounds all right to me. What do you guys, those of you online, how does 45 calendar days sound?
I'm okay with that.
I'm not sure Jim is convinced.
Well, how do you feel about that, Sharon?
I think 45 days is reasonable. I mean,
I mean, you're the one that said you were salaried, so that way, I mean, not to be a jerk, but if you needed to throw a Saturday in it, when you word it calendar days.
I've thrown plenty of Saturdays and Sundays in there.
But
It won't
that's
be
why
the
I'm
last
saying
time.
calendar days instead of working days, and you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
There again, I mean, I think it's, their incentive is to work with you.
Yes.
But I think while we're here, I think we should adjust, I mean, it's easy to do right now,
I
to
agree
adjust
with
it, rather than come back and,
So
6 months.
the way it usually goes is I begin reviewing sites and there may be something that I need more clarification on, or there may be an issue that we need to work out in between. So they hustle to get me information or.
because it's
make
a pretty back and
adjustments.
forth process.
It is very back and forth sometimes. So 20 days maybe isn't realistic, but if there are certain things that I'm still needing, I can request that of them, and then the ball's in their court.
And almost you reset the clock.
Well, and
To
I
a
was
certain
gonna make the point of, maybe that sentence starts out with, upon receipt of a complete application, the county shall have a maximum of 45 calendar days to review submittal.
So basically that if she needs something else, we
Right.
reset the clock.
Right, if they have and as somebody that submits stuff for permits, you're going in there because your client says you better put in for a building permit by Friday. All right, Sharon, I'm not gonna have your drainage plan quite done yet, but here's some crap on the back of a napkin. So you may take that because it facilitates the whole process.
Mhm.
But if they get crappy about it, say, hey, your clock didn't start because you didn't have your PDS permit.
Right, I like that a lot.
Yep, I do too,
Yeah.
I like that.
Everybody online, does that make sense? What the beginning of that sentence, he added, upon receipt of a complete application, the county should have a maximum of 45 calendar days to review.
Sounds good.
And then leave the, or within such further period as agreed
Yeah.
by applicant.
Yep.
Leave that on there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
That
does.
takes the
hurt.
pressure off of everybody.
Yeah,
Yep.
there you go.
Good thinking, Russ.
Yeah. No, I'm not.
Tired.
Okay. Move on to number 3. Anybody have anything in 3? If not, we'll move to 4. Moving on to 5, there's an addition at the end. I'll read the whole thing. If environmental conditions not previously identified or discovered during construction, the applicant should have the right to move or relocate a turbine site only if the discovery would, by law, prevent such use. However, the alternate turbine site must comply with WEX regulations as set forth in Article 27. Any objections on that addition? Number 7. Number 8. Number 9, in B, item B, the addition of transmission line easements shall be filed with the county, and a copy shall be provided to the zoning administrator.
So we no longer require a CUP on transmission lines, but it would still be nice to have the easements on file and just have that conceptual plan of where the transmission lines are at.
I think so. If there's nothing else on B, number 9, letter B. Number 10, add at least one member of the WEX development team shall accompany the project through the end of the construction period for continuity purposes. That member shall be versed in all agreements between the county and the WEX owner developer. And also add at the end, notice of such transfer and acknowledgement by the new owner of compliance obligations shall be provided to the zoning administrator and filed with the Marion County Register of Deeds.
I don't know how feasible that first sentence is, but it sure would be nice to have someone consistent throughout at least through the construction phase of a project. If they have to hire an additional person to be that person, I think it would be beneficial to both parties to have that same person throughout.
I say we accept it and we'll let them worry about the feasibility of it.
Yeah.
That was gonna be my question too, as far as feasibility, it makes sense.
Any other comments on 107? 108 we talked about last month.
That's already in the bank.
Yep.
That's done.
approved.
Okay. We made it.
I got a question that's kind of
Sure.
related to 107 and the transmission lines, and I realize I missed last meeting. But when they were discussing on that appeal of the transmission lines that were gonna be run through, I think it was on the Doyle 4, wasn't it? That there was, did we find out anything about that moratorium that was put in place by the governor on running transmission lines in that area?
Most of the transmission lines, I mean, they're running down KDOT right away.
Mhm.
And so I think that's kind of out of our,
It's out of our jurisdiction. So
Okay,
there's-
because I, you know, there was a, well, let's see how this goes. Brownback had
Voluntary.
voluntary,
Mhm.
and then there was some mandatory, and then just recently, Kelly's put in a, okay, what was voluntary is mandatory and bundle them all together. Is that correct?
I don't
That-
honestly know.
That's what I've come to understand.
That's what I understood.
And if that's the case, my question was, they was bringing up an angle off across by Florence that was in that no-go zone. That's why it's,
Was it in the
It's-
no-go zone, or was it just west of it? Wasn't 77 the division line?
Yeah, Highway 77, so east of Highway 77 and then south of Highway 50.
right,
It
that little
skirts
triangle
around
piece there,
Florence.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's out of my jurisdiction, so I will let them worry about it, honestly.
okay. I was just curious, cause the,
yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think it applied to what what we do here. I mean, they're, like I said, they're running it down KDOT right away, which is kind of out of our hands.
And if they have to do any rerouting or anything to stay within that moratorium, or, stay
right,
out of the moratorium, or
Right.
whatever,
that's on them.
that's on them, yeah.
Excuse me. Very good.
Okay. Anybody have any comments on 27 as a whole? Anything we missed?
I'm sure there is, but.
Well,
Whereas I can't imagine.
we hope we got most of it this go around. It's not the first time, probably won't be the last. Any public comment, final comments? I think there's still Jesse and Randy, so.
I can't really think of anything.
Randy's here for the opening pie.
Yeah, it's welcome to.
Okay. And I think we're looking for a motion to recommend approval.
We close public discussion first, or?
Yeah, we will, that's correct. So
I'd like to make a motion to close public discussion.
we can close it, I don't think we need a motion for it, but yeah, we'll close public discussion. So yeah, we're,
Well, I'd make a motion to approve, the changes we've all discussed in section 27-101 through 27-107.
is there a second?
Second.
I think it should be 108.
107, yeah, through 108.
Well, 108 was already,
108's already.
108's already done.
So, was that Dwight?
Yes.
Dwight wasn't at the last
Yeah,
meeting.
right.
So that last section, 108, came with a piece of language that was intended to go with the the new language in Article 19. The Board of Commissioners requested that Pat Hughes draft that language, and this board went ahead and recommended approval of that, and it went to the Board of Commissioners, and they approved that little piece of it here a couple of weeks ago.
Okay,
That's my fault for not catching you up on that part.
did you get a second?
Yes, we have a second. So it's been moved and seconded to approve 27-101, or recommend approval to the commissioners for 27-101 through 107. There's no further discussion on that. We'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay.
Nay?
Motion carried. We recommend approval.
There's 8 members, so 7 to 1 vote, right?
Yes.
There actually, I think there's 9. There are 9, so it'd be 8 to 1.
8 to 1. Okay, item 5, off agenda items.
Yes. Give me just 1 second here. Sorry. Just a couple of items. By state law, we need to do a review of the comp plan yearly, so if you all could take a look at the comp plan before the next meeting, and we can just discuss that if there's anything that we need to go over. And we don't have to, that's just a discussion, right? I don't have to public notice on that.
No, so, although 99% of people don't ever do this annual review, we would want it as a scheduled agenda item, and it can be agenda item number 1, discuss the comp plan. Does anybody have anything to discuss? The answer is no, done. File, you receive and file. Now, let's say we have a discussion, and there's a couple of things that need to be changed in the comprehensive plan, whether it's a substantial policy change, or whether it's just updating data because of a new census, what have you. We would come to a collective agreement that we need to make an amendment to the comprehensive plan, and then we would have Sharon schedule that, just like we did for these regulation change. We would have to do a 21-day notification of a public hearing for those edits. So any just discussion on the annual basis doesn't need to be a scheduled notified public hearing.
Okay. Just on the agenda.
Just on the agenda to discuss.
Okay. The next thing is that I think you're all aware, I sent an email out. Stonebridge did file an appeal against the board for the decision made regarding their, their denial. So there's a lot of groundwork being done at our office just to get information to the attorney and working with them and getting the facts and the record to them. There may be periods of time where you don't hear anything for a long time. Not necessarily good or bad, it's just the way that works. The board, some of you haven't had the privilege of going through anything like this yet, but just know that the board is covered under the county's insurance. The insurance has appointed Andrew Holder to work this case, and Mr. Cooper will be assisting him in that. So, excellent attorneys. If we make it to the point that they continue to pursue the appeal, it'll go to district court. District court will make a determination, and we'll go from there. It was expected. I mean, on my part, no surprise to me.
I think that our process was kind of a stepping stone. I mean, it's a process.
And we had one of those out at the lake. That was a quick resolution to that lawsuit, thankfully.
Mhm.
I don't think we can
We
expect
didn't,
that.
yeah, we didn't have to go all the
The
way.
chairman of the plant, of the BZA is the only one that spends time in jail, so that's really no issue for any of us.
That's fine.
Yeah, yeah, everybody's fine with that,
Yeah,
aren't you?
we're okay with
Yeah.
We'll just give her some money on
Take
her
one off
account.
and keep me away from all that crap.
Is that all you had?
I had one more quick item. I
Okay.
received an update today from Expedition Wind, and they just are keeping us in the loop. They're active in the county doing survey and geotechnical work throughout the project area. They have kind of a timeline, well, a projected timeline. They're hoping to have start of construction somewhere around March of 2021 and energizing and testing by August of 2021. And then reclamation starting around October of 2021. So we're looking at within a year, they're hoping to have the project built and on the grid. So.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Meeting adjourned.
Kathy, looking at. You want to keep going?
No, A, aye.
Thanks, Kathy.
You can stay here if you want, Kathy, but
You're welcome.
we're out.
We're gonna go home.
Thank you all.
I'm already home.
Come get your cookie, Kathy.
Yeah, I'll mail you a
Nothing.
oatmeal cream pie.
This conference is no longer
Yeah.
being recorded.
Okay. I appreciate everyone's time.